Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Oh, I'm glad to see so many people are joining right away. I know that there was that last minute update to the Zoom link, so I'm glad that people were able to get the right info. Sorry for that confusion. We're just going to give it another minute or so and let people get connected before we go ahead and get started. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for the special webinar today. We're going to be discussing the DCYF OSPI Joint Agency Integration and Inclusion Work, formerly known as IPK. So just a couple protocols before we dive in. I'm sure everybody on the phone is well familiar with Zoom etiquette and all of that, but just a reminder, please make sure to keep yourself on mute. Throughout the presentation today, we encourage people to use the chat box. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to throw them into the chat at any time. We'll be tracking that throughout the meeting. Also, since this will be, I think, a pretty manageable group, I'm sure there will be times throughout the presentation where it will be appropriate to unmute and ask questions or share comments, and Nicole will provide that space for you. So before we get started, I just wanted everyone to take a moment to please introduce yourself in the chat. So when you're able, please share your name, your location, and your role in the chat. And I'll introduce myself really quickly before we get going. So my name is Erin Kerrigan. I am the Community Engagement Administrator here at DCYF. And we're going to be kicking it over to Nicole Parker momentarily so she can dive into the content. Just wanted to give people a moment to utilize the chat and introduce yourself. All right, so with that, I'm going to kick it over to Nicole Parker, who is going to dive into the content of today's meeting with you guys.
And actually, thank you, Erin. I am actually going to just really quickly pass it off to Karen Gans, our ECAP administrator, who is here with us today, and she will be kicking us off with a welcome and some of our first slides here. So Karen, go ahead.
Thank you, Nicole. Hi, everyone. It's great to be back with you again. For those who don't know me, as Nicole said, my name is Karen, and I am the ECAP administrator with DCYF. And I am joined today by Ryan Guzman, who, Ryan, do you want to just come on real quick and introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, my name is Ryan Guzman. I am with OSPI. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm joining from the lands of the Nisqually and Squaxin Island Nations. But I am here representing our special education programs, supporting children within our ECAP Head Start, childcare, etc., and within our school system.
And Ryan is one of our key partners in our joint agency work. She's one of the key members of our core team. And Ryan and I are going to be presenting today along with Nicole Parker, who you just heard from just a moment ago. Nicole, do you want to say anything else about yourself?
No, I think just I'll just share my title real quick. I'm the ECAP Assistant Administrator at DCYF, and I'm coming to you from Seattle right now. Although I live in Spokane, I'm visiting Seattle, so I'm happy to be here with you all.
Great. So then today, what we would like to cover with you, if we can go to the agenda slide, thank you, is we're really going to be looking at revisiting some of the feedback that you gave us the last time we were together, which really has resulted in us providing this special session for additional feedback. We're also going to provide an update for you around the joint agency coordinated recruitment and enrollment work that has been underway since this fall. And that information from that work group and that work will be incorporated into the report. And then we're going to talk with you a little bit about a concept that we have for statewide and regional collaboration groups, and try to gather some input and feedback from you around information that we should make sure that we incorporate into the report on that topic. And then finally, we'll provide the report timeline and review window that will be coming soon for us to share with you. So just to remind everyone, in 2021, we started this work in partnership with OSPI based on the governor's request and mandate for each agency. And we came to provider supports. It was different people. It would have been Kelly Bohannon and Alicia Brender who came to those meetings to provide input and feedback, where we shared an overview of that work, provided you with a draft of the first report in last August, and then attended additional meetings to gather additional information before we finalized the report that was submitted to the governor's office in January. And this year, we have had a similar cycle, although there have been more points of connection where we, again, in April, attended a meeting with all of you, and then also attended an ELAC meeting. We're having the special session today. We'll be pulling together report section feedback. And then the goal is to have our draft report to agency leadership by the end of August. And you can see that we're anticipating that the loop is going to continue from there. Once the report is submitted this fall, that we will be looping back with you again on this topic, because one thing that we do know is that we have a lot of work still to do here. So the main areas of feedback from the last time we were with you in April was whether or not community will have opportunity to weigh in on the draft report, and we are working to make sure that your input and feedback is well recorded, but is also taken in and incorporated into the report. And we also have been working with tribal providers, as well as we did some family listening sessions too. So we have multiple ways that we're trying to gather this input to help us have a more informed report this time around. You gave us feedback that it was important for us to take time to anticipate unintended consequences and make sure that we work to include those in the report. We're working to do that, and we're really looking to you for your support in helping us identify areas where we may have missed some pieces. And making sure that we are inclusive of child care centers and family home providers in the report, and continue actively engaging. So we took that to heart and have been incorporating that feedback into our work and our approach, and are now I'm going to transition over to, I'm going to pass the baton to Ryan, who is going to share an overview for you around the coordinated recruitment and enrollment work that has been happening.
Great. Thank you, Karen. All right, next slide. Perfect. So what you see in front of you is the definition that was created by the advisory group that we have been meeting with over the last, I mean, it is wild to say, but almost a year and a half to 2 years. Time flies, but I will not, if it's helpful, I can read this out. I know some people may not be able to see screen, but the current definition as it stands is a shared process among community programs serving children ages 3 to 5 to support families in selecting a high quality early learning program that best meets the needs of each child and family, and to assure that community early learning programs are working together in ways that maximize services and serve most children, or as I'm going to say that better, and serve the most children possible, period. What we want to say with that is that this is a document that is in draft, and at any point there is feedback and considerations on how to make this even more refined. We are open to those conversations and communications. So yeah, just to note, again, this is based off of feedback from our community partners. This is not OSPI and DCYF saying, you know, this is what this should be. It really is drafted in organic conversations. And we are hopeful truly that this will evolve with time as we continue, and as Karen said, have been engaging with families in our listening sessions. And from what we learn, we want to make sure that we're refining this in a way that's responsive to them. So we can go to the next slide. This is more complex in its visibility, and I realize just with our current state, y'all might be like, this is very small print. What is going on? But we use this as a document to walk through. It's an interactive document. So we are essential in pointing out that where this starts is our families and children. Everything that we're doing, every process that we're trying to define and develop is centered on child and family. And that is the core of the work and the thinking that we're really taking to heart. Just a few points to take into consideration as we move and look at this visual. I'm just gonna kind of hit some key points for y'all, but again, I don't want you to stress at the visual itself. We can send that out in a PDF or something separately so that you can get a good read on it. We've made progress. So we've been working with this over the last year in our CRE is the Coordinated Recruitment and Enrollment State Advisory Group. We're working with them to define the vision of what this really means as a state, to make sure that we're really supporting and moving this through all communities and all needs of communities, because Washington is very diverse and very unique in the space of that. There really are very unique and essential pockets that need to be addressed differently. We want to balance the needs for consistency of choice in every region with the needs of family. We realize that family choice is important. In some cases, it's going to be difficult to prioritize that because of the way our current system works. So we want to be able to elevate that information so we can start diving into that more. We've drawn on existing documents to be able to make these decisions and to be able to guide these conversations, utilizing our respective agencies, so DCYF and OSPI's equity statements, looking at our definitions of inclusion. What does that look like as a whole? Is it different within our respective agencies, taking into consideration also CCA, Child Care Aware of Washington, is a part of our advisory core team. And so we really are looking at the different programs, what their needs are, and how we need to support this differently. And again, why might we be having a common definition, but then a different understanding of that? So we're coming together for those conversations. We're thinking about the work within our tribes and how we can be responsive to the unique needs of each tribe, as each tribe has unique needs. And then also, again, previous conversations over the past year within the first iteration of the IPK report. We are, sorry, because this is quite detailed. I think what we want to make a point of is right now, the focus is going to be on preschool. We know that our recruitment and enrollment system is not exclusive to preschool because our legislative charge is focused on early childhood programming and preschool programming and or preschool age children. We are going to start there, but again, are bringing in other partners that represent our 0 to 3 space and potentially our 5 to 8 space if we think of early learning as a prenatal to age 8 system of support. We want to make sure that we have partners on the ready, understanding the process, understanding the thinking and offering input. So when we can start to make those changes and shifts after we've established this core foundation, that we'll be able to do so in a very seamless way. Okay, I'm just scanning my notes really quickly to make sure I don't miss anything for you. But we're seeking the support, again, of all of our agency partners, really leaning into removing barriers and accelerating improvement. That is the intent of the report. And that is truly something that has been able to be elevated through conversations within our agencies about what does early learning look like in Washington and how can we make it better? But what is in the way of doing so? Where CRE, coordinated recruitment enrollment, truly is an obstacle. In some ways and not others. So we are leaning into the strengths of our current system so we don't start from scratch, but rather we elevate what's working really well. I think that's it. I'm going to stop there, Karen and Nicole. I think, again, going back to, we really are leaning into family and children as our nucleus in our center and really looking to this community here and those outside of this to make sure that we're being most responsive to the unique needs of the communities we serve.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And before we move on to the next slide, I just want to take a moment to, you know, when we're looking at this graphic, you know, and looking at starting with the system change and the statewide CRE committee that Ryan is talking about, I just wanted to provide a little bit more context before I go on to the next slide, because you can see the action team bubbles that are coming out from that, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. So just to let you know that that statewide CRE committee really is comprised of, you know, many partners, and it includes CCA, school districts, providers, including family child care providers, family child care home providers, tribes, ESDs, ECAP and Head Start, contractors and grantees, and other folks as well, private providers as well. So yeah, I think, you know, I just wanted to give a little bit more context there. And, you know, we are the Coordinated Recruitment and Enrollment Committee is really made up of smaller teams that are that are identifying initial goals. And DCYF and OSPI are we're really working to determine the best ways to support that so that all of the providers can successfully provide services to children. So just wanted to give a little bit more context there as we transition to the next slide. So when we're talking about action teams, so eventually, and Karen will talk about this here in a minute, eventually, you know, we want to you know, obviously gather input and feedback on what regional coordination teams may look like. But in the meantime, we decided, you know, the group decided, this CRE state committee decided that we needed to move forward with some specific actions. And so we sorted ourselves into some action teams that were decided by that group, that body, of course. So you can see those in the headers there. I'll just go ahead and read those. There's one action group that is about improving program capacity and addressing enrollment barriers. The next one in purple there is about promoting quality access across programs. And then the third really focuses on engaging families, verifying eligibility, identifying early learning options, and enrolling families. So I'll just go really quickly and say that the bullet points that you see underneath each one of those are the current and proposed actions in those groups. So, you know, for example, in improving program capacity, we want to know, okay, what do we know about where programs are right now? What data do we have about supply and characteristics and gaps? And then, how do we provide some supports for improving funding and braiding and layering of funding and analyzing any barriers that are there. So those are a couple of examples. Another couple that I'll highlight is under promoting quality across programs. We are now, one of the things that I will say about these bullet points that you see under there is that it's building on what we already have as well. So folks in this group did look at some of the things that CCA is providing as far as like the checklist for families looking for quality programs and building off of that. We're looking to, to build a resource library of trainings that already exist that are available to promote quality. So it's really a collaborative effort of what do we already have and what is still needed. And then 3, I would just highlight, one of the things that we're working on identifying and moving towards or suggesting is a common entry point for early learning programs, of course, leaning on what's already available still, and some joint communication with across agencies and programs with families around options available. There's also, some other points that you see there, but I don't need to read all of them. You have this in front of you as well. So we just wanted to share, that's where these 3 action groups are really going. And of course, this is draft and we really want to spend some time, answering questions and getting your feedback about these first actions that these groups are taking in the coordinated recruitment and enrollment work. Karen or Ryan, would you add anything else?
Well, we have a question that came in about where is the access to assessment and observations for outside evaluators that support families and programs. And that's a really good additional component. And those are topics that came up as part of the CRE work. And as we moved the work forward, these were the 3 areas that group of providers determined should be the place where we focus first. And so this is just, again, if you think of that circle that Ryan and Nicole were speaking to, it's intended to be an ongoing process and will be something that we definitely can add to in the future, and we can put it in the report that is something that would be a key focus area as soon as possible. And Ada, it looks like you have your hand up. Did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I think loud motorcycle driving by. So what I think the big issue here is what I'm finding, or at least what I'm hearing in the field currently, is that what's happening, Head Start programs aren't able to meet the children's, developmental needs, and they get sent home either for behavior or whatever it might be multiple times throughout the day, to then tell the parents that I think a childcare program would be able to better fit their needs, or more one-on-one, smaller ratios. Then they get put into childcare, but then childcare doesn't have access to assessment or observations for outside evaluators to then have to expel the children because they're not able to meet their developmental needs. And so these families are being left in the dust to where, or let's say they do, let me take a step back. They do have access, but it's a year out until evaluation could ever happen to begin with, if that makes any sense. So either you have this big bridge with your local school districts for potential developmental preschool, or you have your local child care aware office who has some implemented programs in place for support. But sometimes it's just so scheduled so far out, but there's no time for the provider to be able to meet that child's needs if it's a year out of an assessment. I think this is a great program, but I think at a legislative level, funding is being funneled primarily through Head Start, but then Head Start ain't meeting those needs, and it's being pushed back to early childhood educators, to then we aren't meeting our non-expulsion policies through the WAC that was implemented in 2019. And then it's just this like circle of doom, and in reality, the families and the children are who suffer. So I think it's a very important component that needs to be incorporated, like throughout the state. Where are these programs that we can access? Who's offering the assistance? Whether it be a virtual evaluation, or you could discuss with them about them, or send them a video of the child. I mean, there's so many options with parents' release forms, but I think it's bigger than that at this point. And that's just
Okay,
me
thanks.
talking out loud.
Yeah, no, thanks. I really appreciate hearing what you have to add. I just want to clarify, are you talking about, so one thing I want to clarify is that Head Start is federal funding, and that is a completely different funding stream than the activities that we're talking about.
Yes,
in
I
terms
know.
of state funded. Okay.
Yeah,
which
that's why
is
I'm saying I
ECAP.
think it's on the legislative level, is that funding's being allocated to a program that isn't meeting the needs. And maybe that's somewhere that we could address that we need that type of funding to support early learning programs, right? To, reduce those
Yeah.
barriers for children.
Yeah, and I think, Ada, some of what you are talking about actually is falling under the two, promoting quality across programs.
Mhm.
So many of the inclusive services pieces of work. So that includes the developmental pre-K. So the getting a child on an IEP, that's the work that Ryan oversees at OSPI. And much of that work is falling under the promoting quality across programs.
Nice.
We have a companion document that we can share when we send out the PowerPoint so that you can see some of the more details of what those groups are choosing to focus on. So others are raising that question about, if we're going to have high quality, that means that we're going to have inclusive environments, and that means that providers need the supports that they need in order to be able to meet the needs of children and not have disruption of care for families. So that is going to be incorporated in, just so that you know.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And if I can jump in just really quickly, I think, Ada, you bring up a really good point, because the way that our systems are funded for early childhood programming, it does not necessarily take into consideration where special education or special supports are. And so if special education is going to OSPI funding, apologies for Augie. And then we have, ECAP or Head Start, regardless, we have programming on this side for programming, and then we have special services for this. So I think, these are the conversations we are having, just to, and it's so necessary. Your example, whether it's Head Start or if it was a child in the ECAP program, I think it's happening to someone, and it does come back to, how are we communicating and working together within our systems? How are we ensuring that we are expediting the processes for children that are currently enrolled in the systems? And how are we keeping them where they are so they don't have to keep trying to find a place and continually to get kicked out, expelled? It's damaging. It's damaging to kids and families. So I just appreciate that example. I think it is very relevant in a lot of places.
Thank you, Ryan. And it's just making funding equitable across the board, like where it's getting funneled through all programs in order to maximize the success of not only, every form of early learning provider to support families. And like you said, consistent care is something that we're required to meet by the state. And it's hard if we don't have the resource to be able to do it to help meet individuals' families' needs.
Yeah, thanks again. So we'll at least begin to address it in the report. We're not going to have all the answers, but hopefully we can get enough awareness that, there can be some additional funding to continue to look at that and see, what communities need and providers need to be able to provide inclusive services, high quality services. I'm wondering if we can go back to the last slide, please, because we have some other questions in the chat, and I think having that visual up will help. So I see that there's some questions about this program. This is not a program. And I know that there's confusion about that that's left over from last year. The intention of the coordinated recruitment and enrollment work is to create systems that work collaboratively together to reduce competition so that we have the most number of children and families being served in our state as possible, because we have more children and families that need to be served than we currently have space for. So we're trying to look at our current systems, our current providers. So if you look at that circle down there on the left, that bigger circle that has a lot of different circles in it, that's really looking at what already exists in our system, our mixed delivery system for early learning, and then trying to figure out how can we have some regional supports and then
local coordination that increases the ability for the best placement for children and families to happen, instead of creating competition, which then creates stress for especially private providers and for smaller providers. They're often feeling the biggest brunt with this. And what we're trying to do with that the action teams and the CRE committee is to really identify what are the key areas for us to start focusing on, and then what are the key things that DCYF and OSPI need to make sure that they're focused on to have this system be as successful as possible. So I think that that's just one point of clarification that I want to make, that you're, as a private child care provider or family home provider, you are, you know, in a licensed program, and you are providing services that are part of the system, and we're trying to create a system that ensures less, the best way that I can say it is that it ensures less competition over time. So there's no new program being created here. It is about looking honestly at Head Start programming in the early learning continuum, ECAP programming, licensed and license exempt programming, and family, friends, and neighbor care, as well as transitional kindergarten and developmental pre-K and other community care settings. So we really tried to be inclusive of all of the providers across our mixed delivery system in this, and so that all voices are heard, and that there's opportunity for everyone to help us solve the complex problem that we have in front of us to serve, you know, all eligible children and families for ECAP, but in general to serve as many children and families as we can in our communities who need services and supports.
I wanted to say, I noticed that a lot of worry about universal preschool and Bright K programs before that. And I must say, reach out to your local school districts. My local school district implemented a Bright K program where I could lose kids within my early learning program a year sooner than anticipated. But they're really intentional on reaching out to me once they hear a child has applied for the program. If their needs are being met within my program, do they need any outsourced resources? And there's an application process to get into it. And if they are already receiving quality early learning services, they are not accepted into that program once they know if they're in. So my school district has implemented that practice, but that is not guaranteed across all school districts. So I would reach out to your programs, whoever's in charge of running those Bright K programs, and let them know that, you know, how do we go about that? Because it's a double-edged sword. You know, when the school district reached out to me that they had one child in particular that wanted to apply for the free Bright K program, what were my thoughts of losing that child? And I was like, well, I'm not going to be the one to say no to that family who can have access to free care for a year and have to pay for childcare, especially for private pay if they're not subsidized. So reach out to your local agencies, your school districts, if they are implementing it, how you guys can work together to meet the needs of children by also sharing the love. And my school district has done it very beautifully, but I don't know what that looks like in other counties.
Right, and Ada, that's a great example of what we're trying to accomplish at a statewide level through the CRE work. That is what we're trying to do, is to create openings and opportunities for conversations to better serve children and families. And when I'm talking about the competition, I'm talking about, so you're right, there are ECAP classrooms, there are Head Start classrooms, there are tribal programming classrooms that are having enrollment struggles because transitional kindergarten programming has opened up in their community. And the point of this, or there's enrollment struggles because a new ECAP site has been opened, or there are enrollment struggles because, well, those are probably the best examples that I can give, so that creates this sense of competition, of losing families. And we're really trying to create a system that has everyone working together collaboratively to be able to determine what is the best placement for a family. Families show up with different kinds of needs, and which providers are going to be able to meet the needs of those families the best. So these are really just big ideas. We don't have all the particulars and the solutions sorted for this, but we have some good information to be able to include in the report. And when you get the draft, it will be great for you to pay attention to this so that you can provide further input for further considerations moving forward. And I'm seeing some pieces about regulation in here and OSPI programs, you know, not needing to follow the same requirements as other early learning programs. And I'll say just a little bit, and then Ryan, you can add in other pieces if you want. It is in law that if you are a government entity that there's certain, because those government entities have other robust regulations that they're required to follow, that what they're trying to do is they're trying to ensure that duplication of regulation does not occur. So OSPI run programs have all kinds of regulations. Developmental pre-K has all kinds of federal regulations that they are required to follow, that has them meeting the need. And I think that, you know, I'm hearing that this keeps coming up. And so one of the things that we can probably work on is we can work a little bit better to create a document that shows the regulation requirements for different types of programming in the state that has them essentially being covered through that other regulation beyond the regulation that programming that has oversight from DCYF that programming is required to follow. Ryan, would you add anything?
Not necessarily in that regard. I mean, I think there's more to dig into that. I would be curious, and I don't know if that right now is the time, but I mean, I think those are the conversations that we need to have. What are the regulations that our different programs are required to comply with? I think there's that extra layer when we're talking about IDEA and supporting our students with disabilities. There's responsibilities by every person on this call today to support a child and with a disability, whether it's through IDEA or if it's through ADA or Americans with Disabilities Act. We have responsibility to serve and support, but I like where your head's at, Karen, that we need to do so in a way that is going to be clear to see where and why we might be coming at something in a different way. I just want to say within the conversations around TK, OSPI is asking, the expectation is that our districts are communicating with their community providers. We are doing some very intentional outreach with our school districts and have over the last year and will through this next year to refine that practice and to make sure that this is happening with tools and supports through coaching and data review, looking at saturation studies and really inventorying who's in the community and how we're working together. But I think just going back to Karen, what you said, I think we could do a better job of clarifying the regulations by agency and partner so that we understand the root of what our actions are, depending on what role we sit in.
So I know that there are other comments. I think at this point, we'll move a little bit more through the slide deck, and then we can loop back to try and catch some of the other questions. And maybe even there can be some responses. Like I see that there was a question about not having Karma at OSPI as a contact for transitional kindergarten. Ryan, maybe you can put in the chat who the person is that's been hired and when they're going to be starting so that people will know who to contact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, I'm representing special education, early childhood special education. I can take the questions back as they pertain to transitional kindergarten. I am not going to be a representative solely for transitional kindergarten at the time, is that's not my position. I certainly don't want to put my foot in my mouth. But we can gather these questions and take it back for response, but I won't be able to do real-time conversations in chat completely. But Samantha Bowen is going to be our new executive director of early learning. She will start in August. She does not have an email yet at this time as she has not started, but yeah. Just know we do have someone coming, but Karma is not here because Karma has stepped away from our agency. So some of these gaps and the person that we would expect to hear from is not here. So we're doing our very best and we'll gather the information and take it back to our team so that we can give you the best answers and supports.
So on the next slide, Nicole talked with you about the three main focus areas that have come out of this coordinated recruitment and enrollment work. And then, Nicole, do you want to move to the, just as a reminder, and then we can move to the next slide for other areas beyond assessment and, supports for providers. What other feedback do you have for us to make sure that we're incorporating into the report?
Yeah, so just, I think you all got the slide deck before the meeting. And so hopefully you'll be able to see that slide, as we're talking through this about the three areas with the green, the purple, and the blue there. And just keeping in mind that those action teams are really hoping to work through that. I'm glad that we went back and did that circle of providers that Karen talked about. So really that these action teams are focusing on how we can coordinate and integrate, in those groups of providers under these kinds of topics. So how do we improve program capacity and address enrollment barriers across the system? How do we promote quality across programs across the system? And how do we engage families, do eligibility and enrollment for programs across the system working together? So as you think about those categories and those first actions that are on that slide, we'd just like to ask these questions about, are we on the right track? Will these strategies support your work? And what other actions do you think will be supportive? Again, kind of an open call for feedback on those action teams and those items and where we could adjust, add, or improve. And I think this is where we were going to pop into some small groups, Erin, to talk about that. And one of the things, I know, Erin, you'll probably tell people how to, collect their, how to document their conversations and things like that. So I think I'm going to pop it over to you for some directions on how we do those small groups.
Okay, great.
But
so
I also want to make sure that if people have any questions about these questions or the topic before we actually move to the groups too.
Yeah, I have a question, Karen. This is Julie. Can you just tell me if I'm understanding this right? IPK is DCYF's program to put all of early learning programs under one umbrella. It's not an actual program, it's just kind of a thing. You guys, you ECAP, Head Start, early learning programs, but TK is OSPI and it doesn't fall under IPK. Is that correct, or am I misunderstanding?
TK is kindergarten. So yeah, I think Karen, you can answer that too, but TK is not preschool. It is funded under basic ed and is considered and follows the regulations of kindergarten. So the WACs for full day kindergarten would be the WACs that the TK programs and schools would be following.
Okay, and I would say TK is kindergarten. How low does TK go? What age?
The expectation it would be for 4-year-olds that are.
That would be, Ryan, the same program I talked about, but my school calls it Bright K, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's where they could get that. And like, I understand the implementation of this, where when they enter kindergarten, they want them prepared socially, emotionally, right? Which is the biggest loophole, which happens where when they enter kindergarten, they're not ready or prepared for that. Like, I love the implementation of this, but I think the biggest where we have to make those connections, where I appreciate this program looking at all that, is how we could bridge the collaboration between ECAP, school districts and early learning programs licensed by the state. So I see it coming together. I just don't want us left in the dust. So I appreciate a seat at the table.
Yeah, and that's the intent. I mean, and that's where we started a project last fall, and we will be bringing that into the next school year, is working with our school districts, bringing them together to develop a program-wide leadership team that would include their community partners, that would have them inventorying their current, whether it's childcare or community preschool programs. It could be, beyond ECAP and Head Start, co-ops, et cetera, et cetera. So we just want to make sure that we are helping our districts find and refine ways that they're communicating and building these programs and aligning them with ECAP.
Yeah, and one thing I see, Susan, I see your hand up. One thing I just want to reiterate here too is that this is spurring from our proviso that we had, and I'm just going to read a little bit of that language. So the DCYF proviso says that the department has to collaborate with OSPI to complete a report, which is why we're here, with options and recommendations for administrative efficiencies and long-term strategies that align and integrate high-quality early learning programs administered by both agencies. So all of the early learning programs for 3 to 5-year-olds that are administered by DCYF, and all the early learning programs that are 3 to 5-year-olds that are administered by OSPI, including developmental pre-K and transitional kindergarten. We are tasked to work together as agencies to come up with how we can align and integrate those. And so that's what this joint agency work is all about.
Thank you, Nicole.
So, hi, this is Susan Brown. And the questions I'm wondering about is one, our state constitution only mandates basic K-12 education. And all of the school districts I've worked with don't allow kids to enter kindergarten until they're age 5. So I can't help but thinking this is one way to be able to fund preschool with state funds by calling it transitional kindergarten. That's one thought that's coming to mind. But also, if this is truly gathering information about the plan and what are the impacts, has the train left the station such that it could not be turned around? If the feedback is this is a terrible idea and it will literally be the collapse of the childcare sector overall, or is this moving forward no matter what, and this is really more an exercise of, well, we gathered the information, but we're still going to move forward? I mean, what is the point of this feedback? Is it really to inform and actually help make a decision, or what is the purpose?
So I would say, Susan, that what we have heard from the governor's office and the state legislature is that because we have local control for school districts, that OSPI and others in the legislature have approved and allow for K-12 kindergarten funding to be spent on 4-year-old children who are not otherwise going to be ready for kindergarten. So this is something that it's been deemed as allowable, and we are tasked by the governor and the state legislature to work with OSPI to try to come up with solutions that are going to have this be something that can be successful instead of something that is going to decimate a certain part or certain parts of our sector. Because I will tell you, ECAP contractors have the same fears that you have, Susan, about transitional kindergarten and the impacts that it has on their programming and the amount of work that they have to do in order to be able to really reach collaborative agreements with school districts that are not going to close programming. So I think that what we're trying to do is we're trying to pull as many people and perspectives together to be able to create informed recommendations. And I think that there are other suggestions that you all have put in the chat that I've made note of that we will work to incorporate into the joint agency report, and that we also can work to incorporate into the ECAP entitlement report, so that we're also really paying attention to where and how ECAP is expanding, so that child care and family home providers are part of that, are part of becoming ECAP providers, or are part of working with their community to determine where slots can go in places that are not going to fundamentally disrupt business at the level where it would not be able to continue.
So basically, really what it boils down to is we're doing this, we're just trying to figure out how to cause the least amount of harm.
Yep.
Understanding that there will be harm caused.
Well,
Hi.
I mean, I think
Hello?
that, yeah, I mean,
This is
Go ahead,
Gloria.
Gloria.
I raising my hand. Okay. Yes, I am a family child care provider, and most of the licensed child care providers, we working with those children, 4-year-olds of 4 years and a half old, that they cannot go to the kindergarten because they don't are 5 years old. We working with them. We helping them in the transition to kindergarten, and also we taking some kids that parents made a decision don't send them to the kindergarten because the child care is far away from the school district, and the school district don't provide transportation to those children. We staying with those children, and we trying our best to helping them in that transition. And I really want the program include us family child care providers to be part of this success, because we collaborating without be recognized. But yes, all the family child care providers with licenses, we want to be part of this.
absolutely. And I'll just say from the ECAP perspective, as a family child care provider, I don't know what parts you want to be part of, but as from the ECAP perspective and the systems that we've created, you can provide ECAP services as a family child care provider. And if you don't want to provide ECAP services, then that's okay too. And what we want to do is we want to create a system that makes sure that private child care and family home providers are part of this local decision making about where slots are placed and how we're making sure that private providers have the slots that they need to have viable businesses.
And I don't want to interrupt any discussion, but I also want to bring our attention back to gathering the feedback that you see on the screen. So I'm going to have, I'm going to reshare. So Jessica Spencer added the Jamboard links in the chat a bit ago. I'm re-adding them. So if you click on Jamboard A, and when you get in there, you'll see an icon menu on the left that offers the option of Post-it note. So when we're going to break you into small groups, and typically it's easier to just assign one person in the group to be the scribe who will be taking notes on what your group is discussing and putting them on Post-it notes and pinning them to the board. So there will be multiple groups in the board at once, so you'll see Post-it notes appearing. Just an important note is to please don't click the clear frame button, because that will clear everybody's frame, not just yours. So just stay away from that button. And you should be getting a link to join a breakout group shortly. And Nicole, how long do we want to give for that?
Remind me what time we're done here.
So we have until 12:30.
Okay, because we have a lot more to share.
So Nicole,
let's
sorry, this is Deanna. I was just going to say, because you guys haven't talked about the teams yet.
Yeah.
And that's one of these Jamboards is Jamboard B. And so we can't really put people into Jamboards and breakouts if you guys haven't talked about it yet.
Sure. Yeah, maybe we do that. Maybe we run through some of the information on the regional teams and then we can pop into small groups. Does that work for everyone? Mm-hmm. Okay. So the next slide really talks about this idea of, how we can look at creating some regional collaborative teams. And so this is the part where I think DCYF and OSPI are figuring out what are the processes that need to be in place, because there's been over the years multiple funding streams, federal funding streams that have come in that have tried to create better coordination and support for early learning providers across our mixed delivery system. And I think that part of what we want to do is we want to be able to bring forth a proposal that is going to help get some funding in order to be able to have these kinds of activities be sustainable. So like Nicole said, we've had over 100 participants from across the mixed delivery system informing the coordinated recruitment and enrollment work that is very representative of our mixed delivery system. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to be able to think about what's the ongoing scaffolding or supports that would need to happen that we could propose to the state legislature. Here's what communities are saying that they need in order to be able to have collaborative enrollment processes that that really place children and families in services that are going to best meet their needs. And in order to do that, we have a proposal here that's on the slide, and we really are going to want to get your feedback on that. So we've identified some providers as being part of the core team and making sure that there's representation that would be part of that core team across the mixed delivery system, and then making sure that there's also a larger team that can help inform that regional level work. And it's intended that that regional level work will then help make things easier at the local level, because there will be processes and agreements that are part of this regional collaborative work. We have just some ideas that we've put on here. This has a big, if we could have a big draft watermark on this, we would. This really is intended just to be an idea starter and to get other ideas from you about the who else should be part of the core team. The full team, can include some other providers as well. And we are thinking that, this would really be a mix of some requirements for OSPI around inclusionary services and the Early Learning Coalition work and, SEIU work, that we would make sure that we have broad representation that then could have some funding that could go to it to help move this work forward. So there's all different kinds of members that could be part of this, including family resource centers, birth to 3 programming, parent help organizations like Help Me Grow and Within Reach. We could also have Washington Communities for Children. I already said SEIU, but I'll say it again, and then the Child Care Coalition. So we're interested in hearing your ideas around, the best pieces that are going to be key to having something like this be successful so that we can make that recommendation in the report. They're really going to work, these groups would work to
establish these teams that could look at collaboration around location of classrooms, sharing joint resources, looking at program availability, maintaining, really looking at the region for enrollment and what the needs are, and then bringing that back up to the state level so that we have smaller feedback loops instead of some of these larger feedback loops that we currently have. So those are just some of the ideas. And I think I'm passing it off to Nicole now, and Nicole and Ryan.
Yeah, and we'll get into some more proposed, and I want to say that again, just like Karen did, proposed draft ideas about roles and potential decision-making for these regional teams here in a minute. But let's talk a little bit more about connections with existing groups as well, because as we kind of floated this idea with the coordinated recruitment and enrollment team, they were like, okay, what about the existing groups that we have? And so how do we want to connect to these groups? So I'm just going to share really quickly, and Ryan, I know you, hopefully you can share super quickly as well, because we've got a lot more to get through, is like, for example, on the DCYF side, our preschool development grant team, our PDG team, is really working closely with Washington Communities for Children, as Karen said earlier too, mentioning that in the last slide. And really from that work, we're learning a lot about ways we're connected and need to be connected to do this work well for children and families. And we just want to explore a little bit more with you about how we can connect to Washington Communities for Children and other existing groups across the state that have, that are stakeholders in this work. And so just wanted to kind of give that example. And Ryan, did you want to say anything about the OSPI side here really quickly before we move on?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I just want to say from OSPI stance, we are hearing you, we listened to you, and we're truly doing the best that we can. I think what's difficult about this is that change takes time to feel and to see. And Ada, I'm glad that you're on the call today, because you are working with one of the districts that is a part of our grant work that is really taking this seriously and trying to create some methodology that will make this more of a cohesive system. But within our OSPA work, we are focusing on inclusionary practices, supporting children across demographics that may not meet the criteria to be enrolled in an ECAP or Head Start program, for children that don't have access to subsidies or working connection supports, and families that aren't able to access either Head Start, ECAP, childcare because of the fiscal burden that it puts upon them, and or for children with disabilities or challenging behaviors that are getting kicked out of these programs. It's great that we have them, but if we can't get our kiddos to get into them or stay in them, we need to have places for them to be, which is why this is so important. We have our early multiple initiatives that are going on right now where we're supporting conversations around inclusion and supporting all children across our 0 to 5 systems and beyond. Preschool Inclusion Collaboration Team is an opportunity for any of you to engage and to support these conversations, as well as some of our more organized projects that are within our school systems, and that's within our state systemic improvement plan. I'm sorry, they're long, boring titles, but the focus is on inclusionary practices and engaging partners within our communities to elevate families and children and to create access points for them, regardless of eligibility or fiscal ability. So just know that we are hearing you, and we are being as responsive as we possibly can and bringing this to our regional and our local levels so that we can take this to them with data, with resources to ensure that they are thinking about the needs that you've brought forward.
All right, so I might move us on to the next, Ada, I see your hand up, but I might move us on just to get us through this next couple pieces of information, and then we can pause for questions. So we're back to the regional collaborative team and this idea of, so we talked about who might participate. Now let's talk about what do we think, what are we proposing the roles might be. So the core team role might be to, coordinate and facilitate the full team, to navigate and facilitate dispute resolution, and then make some decisions if the full team can't come to the consensus, or, you know, make some final decisions from the full team recommendations. And so then the full team would be the comprehensive advisory committee for the region. And there would be some joint decision-making and or recommendations on core issues that are brought up to the team. And then they would also develop and approve policies and procedures for that specific region. So if you're thinking about the folks that we said that would be on that team, and then this would be some of the roles, and then you're probably wondering, okay, so what kind of policies or what kind of things will they be deciding on? So we can go ahead and go to the next slide, and I can walk you through that. So let's look at the left side for right now. These are primary recommendations. So these are the ones that we're like, okay, this is the need that we're hearing right now from you all and from providers and partners across the state. We need to be able to communicate program availability and to recruit families and recruit families and work with the community partners. We need to make sure that we are, doing an enrollment process that is coordinated, that services for children with identified special need are provided a least restrictive environment, that we're sharing resources and information for each other, and that we're establishing and maintaining a dispute resolution process to ensure that, if there's disputes that come up among partners, we know how we are, resolving those disputes and agreeing together. Some of the secondary recommendations are things that may come up in the future that people have suggested. So things like locations of classrooms, a continuous quality improvement process, adoption and implementation of curriculum or other, quality frameworks, use of those supplemental materials and curricula enhancement. So those are some ideas that we think like, okay, we've got to get on the same page first about how we're recruiting and enrolling children and maintaining, those things in the left-hand column. And then maybe we can also get to some recommendations, the secondary recommendations as well that are also important. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move us on to the next piece. So that was really about the regional groups. And then what we're proposing is that there would also be a state group at the state level to kind of match this. And so this is a statewide collaborative committee, and representatives would really be interacting with the regional groups. And you can see who the representatives that we're suggesting might be at the state level. On the left-hand side. And really the purpose of this committee is to work and support the implementation of those regional collaborative teams, to offer technical assistance to those collaborative teams, and to provide direction, guidance, and support really to those regional teams. So we think that there needs to be that layer as well too. So when regional teams are having issues or have questions, need to be talking to the statewide collaborative committee. Again, this is all very, very draft, but we are hoping to get your feedback on it today. So with that, go ahead and go to the next slide. We know that, okay, we have these committees. What are we going to do about how we're going to establish these committees? So these are some legislative recommendations that we would make in our report, is to create and fund the state steering committee, to create and fund the regional collaborative teams, to fund some government-to-government training for state and regional teams, and that's based on provided feedback from our tribal partners, and also funding for tribes to participate in those teams specifically as well. Okay, that was a lot of information. So let's go ahead and take a pause for a minute, see if my partners here, presentation partners, have anything to add. And then let's combine the questions for feedback that we had earlier with these ones. So really, we're just asking, what are your thoughts on this information that we've presented? What are we missing? And what do you think needs to change? All right, so I see Jessica putting the Jamboards in again. So I think what we're going to do is transition to small groups and think through these questions for feedback. And again, I think we're done at 12:30, right? So let's go ahead and make sure we come back with 10 minutes left if we can, or 8 minutes left if we can, so that we can talk about the timeline for the report. So Arian or Deanna, are you launching us into small groups?
Yes, so let me see. Jess will be sending those notices out. So just a reminder to everybody to go ahead and open the Jamboard A link on your browser now, because you won't be able to access the chat when you're in your breakouts, and you should be getting invites to your breakouts momentarily. Nancy, we will be sending out the slides after the meeting. I can't speak to whether the Jamboards will be left open or not, because I know there's a tight turnaround, but we can be in touch after the meeting. If you have additional feedback to share, I'm sure Nicole would be happy to connect with you. Nicole, I'm speaking for you if that's okay. Okay.
So do we join whichever one? Because 4 popped up on my screen.
Oh, yes, sorry. So we are doing both. So I think, yes, you could just choose whether you want to do CRE or Teams. Is that correct? No further instructions from there. So yes, join whichever Jamboard you'd like to start with.
I don't know what happened. I was in my room and then all of a sudden I was no longer in my room. Was that intentional?
We're all coming back, I think.
Okay.
All right, so I was in the state teams, the regional and state team, the different teams group, and got some great feedback from Colleen right at the end, but I just want to highlight around making sure that as we think about creating these structures for greater collaboration, that we really purposefully look at power dynamics and that we make sure that we are truly creating equitable spaces for everyone's voice, especially for smaller providers, and making sure that that's a really purposeful and intentional part of the work. I really appreciate that comment and that recommendation, Colleen, and we will make sure that we incorporate that one in. How about from the other team? Is there any kind of highlight?
Yeah, I think we had a really great comment too about, how do we ensure that participants in this work have equal power? So I think it's kind of related to what you were just saying, Karen, about power dynamics. And then we talked a little bit, we kind of cut off right at the end, of course, but we talked a little bit too about the common entry point and how do we make sure that as we're thinking about a common entry point that, private providers are included in that, and that CCA does a lot of that already. And, just clarifying that we need to make sure that we're incorporating everybody into that process.
So thank you everyone for your feedback. We encourage the people in our group to continue to add ideas through the rest of the meeting to the Jamboard for us to make sure to incorporate. I think that you can open either Jamboard to look and see what others have said and put in, and you then add in additional suggestions or ideas for us to consider.
And I also, oh, sorry. I know that we have a couple just reflection surveys for the group. that we'd like to get their input on before we log off. But as Karen said, please feel free to stay in the Jamboards, keep sharing your feedback. And I think we should have some quick survey for everyone.
Yeah, can you go back? Oh, I just wanted to just make sure and highlight the report timeline for everyone to see. We're going to have some, you can see it's a very tight schedule that we have here, and that we're hoping that you can set aside some time to be able to look at the feedback. We'll try and get information to you as soon as we can. If you move to the next slide. Really the review of the draft is going to be between August 16th and 22nd. And we will I think that if you can let us know the best way for you to receive that information, that then we'll make sure to get that information to you. We'll email it to you for everyone in this group through Erin and others on this team, and then we also can pull together another meeting if you think that would be helpful once the report is further along. Nicole, I don't know if you had something that you were going to add there. I saw you picking up your phone.
Yeah, just to clarify that these are the actual report sections. So our report sections aren't quite due yet. They're due in another couple of weeks. And so we're asking how you would like to review the report sections, the actual pieces of writing. It's within this time period that we're going to have the drafts available. And again, we recognize it's a very short time period. I think the important part here to see is that our first drafts are due to our consultants on the 5th of August, and then we'll be incorporating all of those together the next week after that. And then the week after that, the one that's highlighted and bolded is where we are doing agency partner and stakeholder review of that first draft. So that's going to be one of the time periods that we'd really like you to review and gather feedback around. And you can definitely take some time and review this, in your, after this meeting, because I think you have this slide, but just let us know. We'd really like to hear whether, is email going to work for that, and you can set aside some time to review and get us feedback, or do we want a meeting? How do you think is best to get this review done?
And we can definitely include that question and with a way to kind of gather everybody's feedback on that in the follow-up email, Nicole, and get that to you guys. And then I just want to scoot forward to the closing survey. If everybody would take a moment, we just have 2 quick questions to get your input on. And like was mentioned, we will be sending a follow-up email that will include the slides and also information for how to connect with this team to provide further input, and also getting your input on how you want to receive that information and future meetings, next steps, things like that. So we will be getting that out to you in the next few days. And there's a Mentimeter link in the chat, so if everybody wouldn't mind providing their input. And I think we have one more question if we want to move to that one.
Are you looking at Julie's question about transitional kindergarten? Oh, no, I see your question about,
Oh, yes, yes.
I got it now. I see.
Yeah. And we are tracking everything that's been shared in the chat. Is being tracked and is being included in the meeting minutes and marked for follow-up. So we will be tracking all of that. And just if anybody else has anything, any feedback you'd like to share with the presenters or the community engagement team about today's meeting, please do so. And you'll see that question on the screen and the Mentimeter link in the chat. And as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you everyone for your time. Thank you for joining us for this webinar, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions, and you will be hearing from us in the next few days with that follow-up information.